It's nice to be here. I want to thank the folks that asked me to come here. I want to thank everyone who has anything at all to do with this, from top to bottom, so that we can all come here and enjoy ourselves. Special thank you to Carol down here, who's signing. I always watch that, and I think that's an awful lot of work, special effort, and I'm trying not to say try not to say anything in Comanche that she can't translate, or in English for that matter. So, I thank you for the nice gifts that I received, the bags and stuff. I noticed this morning that this is really a classy hotel. I walked in the bathroom and I thought I've never been in a place where they put blue stickers on the toilet paper to let you know that they've been there. Certainly didn't do that in prison. Anyway, it's nice to be here. It's good to be sober. Now, one of the things that, referencing what John said, I got the treatment, I'll talk about a lot of this stuff pretty quick, but got the treatment, people said, well, you can't remember your last treatment, maybe you haven't had it yet. And I thought, I don't know how much of a problem it is for most people. When I got Dan Rather and Peter Jennings and Tom Brokaw telling the world about mine, I don't find it to be a real problem. I never had any trouble remembering my last drink. I'm supposed to talk about, I always get caught here because I used to say what it was like, what it's like now. And there was an old timer, Southwest Georgia, that sent me a very cryptic email. He said, "You're misquoting the big book." I said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah, I just listened to one of your CDs." And he said, "What it was like." And I said, "Well, thanks for pointing that out to me. I'll try to do better." And so I hope that's the worst mistake I ever made. He fired back. He said, "Well, you know, all us old timers don't like to hear that big book misquoted. Several of them down here, if you'd said that, they'd have got up and walked out." I said, "Oh, wow, really?" I said, "Well, I just took a look at how it works, and it does not say, rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly memorized the book." Sometimes I just can't resist. I mixed the order up a little bit. I'm going to talk about what happened first, because it was a big attention getter. And on March the 7th of 1990, a place called the Speakeasy Restaurant and Lounge in Fargo, North Dakota, I had my last series of drinks. The following morning, and there are 3 days that always, every year the days that roll by, always really register big time with me, and that's March 7th, 8th, and 9th. On March the 8th, an event took place that had never come to the public's attention, and you'll notice how I phrased that. I didn't say it's never happened before, I just said it never come to the public's attention. And that is that an airline crew was arrested for having flown drunk. And I was the first pilot off the airplane to be arrested, and that's happened a number of times since then. I've noticed that each time it happens, it gathers less and less media attention, but at that time it had never occurred before, and boy, I mean, there was a media blitzkrieg on this thing. And I spent 12 hours that day, sometimes in a very surreal setting, thinking that this just couldn't be happening to me. Because I hadn't lived in such a way as to watch something like this occur in my life. I didn't think. And there were times when I just really felt like I was having an out-of-body experience as I watched this whole thing unfold, because I was watching my life end. I had no way of knowing that a new one was beginning at the same time. I just knew that my life as I knew it was ending. Northwest Airlines at that time, and I can keep the airline anonymous. I don't do it on purpose. I hope that it will be evident by the time I finish the story. But Northwest Airlines at the time was the only major carrier that did not have a program for alcoholic pilots. All the other airlines, the major carriers that had one, they've been in place since 1975, and they were highly, highly, highly successful. Not because they're dealing with pilots, but because it was a very long, involved, complicated, complex, cross-reported, check, double-check, triple-check system. And it went on for 2 years at the time. It's now up to 3. The Northwest had refused to join in that program, and I knew that, as a matter of fact, one of the guys that had called, there were 4 of them that had called on Northwest Airlines at one point in time to engage in this, and they were kicked out of the CEO's office. It was an older CEO way back when, but he made a statement that's related to me by this guy that we don't have any alcoholic pilots, and if we did, we'd fire them. Now, I knew there were some alcoholic pilots in Northwest. I didn't think I was one of them. One of the things also I want to clarify right here at the first and get some of this stuff out of the way is that, many times when we come to the podium, we don't talk about what we did for a living. We leave that stuff at the door because it doesn't make any difference to them. This is Alcoholics Anonymous. I talk about it because it's a central core part of the story. That if I had been anything other than an airline pilot, if I had been a doctor, a lawyer, a plumber, electrician, none of the things that happened, the consequences would not have occurred. I would not have received all the attention. I would not have qualified myself for a federal felony crime, and nor would I have gone to prison. So it's just a part of the story. I make a distinction that I'm not an airline pilot who was a drunk. I was a drunk. Through a lot of good fortune and some good things along the way. I got to live out a dream and fly for a living. And I don't do a lot of editorializing from the podium. I don't believe we have prestigious status in this fellowship. We don't, as far as I am concerned. I don't believe in celebrity status or anything else like that. That I think that, in my view, the best we ever accomplish here is to get sober. If we get sober, we have just achieved the highest level of status and prestige and position that AA affords us. And until I get the word that we have broken ground on the AA Hall of Fame, I will continue. The incident that day was devastating. I tried for a long time to find words to describe it, and it's right there in the big book in a very short, succinct, perfectly phrased description. Pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And it was all of that, absolutely all of that. The instant overwhelming feeling that I experienced as I walked into the arms of the police, the FAA officials, Northwest Company officials, was shame. Deep, deep, penetrating shame and disgrace. I think the reason that it was so devastating even at the beginning, and it got worse as time went on, was that I had been the standard bearer in my family when I talked to my kids about things like duty, honor, country, character, honesty, integrity. And suddenly, I'm in this nightmare that is going to catapult me to the front of all the media to the point where I will become a national disgrace, complete total pariah in all of aviation. Scorned, people angry, contempt, disdain, all of them deserved from my viewpoint. And that had never been my goal in life. I had been taught, and I'll talk about some of my family situation, I had been taught, even by 2 parents who died from this disease, to always do my best, that no matter what it was that I was doing, I was to do it in a way to reflect honor and pride and dignity on whatever that was, whether I was putting on a Marine Corps uniform, representing my family, my heritage, my profession, my whatever it was, I was always to do it in a way that I walked away and I left it bright and shiny in a dignified way. And I had grown up that way. And suddenly now, in the blink of an eye, I have shamed and disgraced and destroyed everything that I held dear and treasured in one evening, this had all happened. And I had a hard time dealing with that and accepting that. We were released finally after 12 hours. We'd given blood to 2 different facilities. I had given a sworn statement to Northwest Company attorney, who was all of us had. Well, I had drawn one of the guys that was known to be very brutal, a man by the name of Doug McKean. And my recollection of Mr. McKean as he deposed me was one of some level of compassion and empathy and even some degree of gentleness. And I thanked him for that later. I got home the next morning, which was March the 9th. I was supposed to get home the night of the 8th. I called when I finally released and got my answering machine. My wife was at the airport waiting on me. She waited for 4 hours that evening and I didn't show up. And I just told her I didn't know what to say when the answering machine kicked on. And I just said, there's been a disaster. I think I lost my job. And I'll be home the first flight in the morning. Later, I thought what a gift it was that she didn't call me back and want to know what I was talking about. Why would anybody, just having received that information, would not have immediately called me back. I didn't want to talk about it. I just wanted to be reflective on it. I got back to Atlanta the next morning. I never told the story, but I did say that I got to the front of the terminal and I looked over and I saw Barbara parked by the curb. I felt like I had to climb over the curb to get in the car with her. I could not look at this woman I've been married to for a long time. I could not even look at her. And all I could say is, honey, I'm so sorry. And she pulled away from the curb. She's got a very soft South Texas accent. She said, who better than I can possibly understand how you feel right now? We drove home in silence. Again, later, I looked at it and I thought again it was a gift. But she didn't say, what happened? Why were you drinking? You knew the rules. Why were you there? You knew what was at risk. Even later, she'd apologized or felt bad about it, but she never said a word to me. So we drove home, and she went to work. I went in the house, and it was deathly quiet. And I wanted to be anywhere but in my skin. And I couldn't stand the quiet atmosphere of the house. And I called a doctor who was the only doctor I knew at the time. He was a family therapist. And I called him and I said, I've got to declare an emergency and I need to come in and see you right away. And he said, come straight in, I'll clear the calendar. So I drove over to his office. I can still see all of this as though it was 5 minutes ago. I remember the color of the walls, where the counter was, where his desk was. I walked in and I just told him straight out what had happened. And I remember this look of complete shock and horror on his face, just surprise. And he said, my God, Lyle, he said, this is absolutely horrible. He said, just horrible. And he started around his desk and he stopped and he looked at me. He made a statement that I could not even begin to fathom or process or comprehend. He said, but maybe this is what had to happen. And I did not understand that comment. I just didn't get it. I was in a state of complete, total, shredded devastation, mentally and emotionally at this point. He left and came back a few minutes later and he said, okay, I've got an appointment. This is a Friday. Now it's March the 9th, it's a Friday. And he said, there's a doctor, a very prominent doctor here in Atlanta. He was certified in addiction medicine, which I'd never heard of. And he said he wants to see you tonight at 6 o'clock. I'm thinking 6 o'clock Friday night. That conveyed a certain sense of urgency to me that most doctors don't see patients. He'd been on the golf course for 4 hours by then. He said he is himself a recovering alcoholic cocaine addict. And you're to go over there this afternoon to see him this evening. So I did. Barbara went with me. We made our way over there. We went in the office. She waited outside. I have no recollection of that meeting. It's just like a blackout. I hadn't had anything to eat for 2 days. I hadn't had anything to drink for 2 days. But I don't remember anything about that meeting, except a couple of things. I don't know if I was in there 10 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes. What I know is I was so beaten and so devastated that whatever it was he asked me, I just gave him the best answer I could, the most truthful answer I was capable of at that time. And at some point, he looked at me and he said, well, you're an alcoholic. You need to get into treatment tonight. The thing that I remember also that was tied to that moment is that I had no reaction to that. And the reason that's significant is because I had hated alcoholics all my life. I grew up in a family. I saw it there. I saw it in the Native community. I had nothing but disgust and disdain and contempt for alcoholics. And suddenly he's telling me I am one, and I don't have anything going on inside me here. I thought later, in that 24-hour period, I think I already knew at some level. I connected the dots. I knew that I had lost a whole lifetime of whatever it was I had. It was because I was drinking in a place I wasn't supposed to be. And I knew I was an alcoholic. I looked at him, I said, I thought you'd probably tell me that, and I'm okay. And I said, I just got home today. I said, I'd like to go home. And I said, I'd like to ask Barbara just to hang on to me. Just let her hold on to me, let my mind uncoil until I can sort what's just happened. And then I'll go into treatment. He said, you need to go into treatment tonight. I looked at him, and I paused for just a moment, and I thought, well, why would I come over here if I'm not going to do what he said? So I looked at him and said, okay. So we drove back across town to the treatment center. I had no idea where it was, what it was. Had no reason to know anything about it. We followed his directions, and it was dark, and as we turned the final corner, the headlights hit a sign directly in front of us. And it said Anchor Hospital, hospital for alcoholism and other chemical dependencies. And I hit the brakes, the lights were shining on the sign directly in front of me, and it was just like somebody had kicked me right in the stomach. As I sat there and I looked at this sign, I thought, my God, I'm 51 years old, and this is how my life wraps up. This is where it ends, in a treatment center for alcoholics. And I couldn't have felt any worse at the time. I just couldn't have felt more defeated. And just for a few seconds, probably microseconds, I had a quick flashback of some of the high points of my life, the real pinnacle moments, the things that were really trophy moments in my life, things that I thought were measured, marked me, and defined me, and gave me some idea of who I was and what I was. It was just like somebody took a giant eraser and wiped them out. They were gone, and they had never existed, and they didn't count. Neither did I. And I sat there, and I felt like I had absolutely zero value as a human being. Later, I read a report, kind of an interesting report, a summarizing paragraph by this doctor. Said, given the history and background of this man, it's unlikely to believe he would ever be a productive member of society. All right, that was a shocker. I looked at that and I thought, God darn, that's pretty doggone dismal. And I sat there and I thought, well, I'm the one who gave him all the information. We started down the hill, and suddenly, I thought, this is March the 9th. This is my 27th wedding anniversary. I said to my wife, hell of a way to spend an anniversary, huh? And again came that soft voice, and she said it might be the best one we ever had. Wow. I couldn't handle it. I thought, who could think that? Who could think that in a moment like this? So I didn't respond. Now, I want to kind of kick into a little bit of a lighter note because I can feel myself choked up here, which is okay. I don't have any problem with that. But this past March the 9th, we just celebrated 45 years together. I've heard a lot of AA stories, and I know that that's slightly above the average. One of my sponsees came over, and he said, I just wanted to stop by. Wish you guys a happy anniversary. He said, what do you think is the reason you stayed together for so long? I thought I'd just defer to my wife. I said, I don't know, honey, what do you think? She said, I think it's mostly because I could never stand to admit I made a mistake. So my hope is she never gets a program that works on character defects. we drove down the hill, and I am thinking about this treatment center, wondering what it's going to be like. And the only thing that ever flashed through my mind at that moment was that movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Most of it's not anything at all like it, like what the reality of it was. But let me stop here and I'll kind of go back and hopefully I'll come back and catch up. I'll start by telling you that I was born in Wichita, Kansas on September 29th, 1938, so I'm coming up on 70 next month. It's 70. A lot of people guess me younger, and I feel like I'm about 35, really. One of these days I'm going to wear out, but I'm a very active guy. I'm engaged in a lot of stuff. I'm grateful for the health because I shouldn't really have it, so it's a gift. I'll tell you I'm 70 because I do the work when I'm sitting out there, and it's usually the women that drive me crazy up there. And I noticed that Candace didn't get involved in that today, but usually they throw out little tidbits of information, and I'm doing the detective puzzling work. Like, you know, it was the year after Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And then a little later on, something else would come out, and I went, okay, now I'm narrowing in on how old she is. But I'm missing part of what's going on, because I'm trying to do all this figuring. And by the time it's over with, she got me so confused. I'm going, she either 43 or 71. So I just tell you straight out. So, get that out of the way. I was born into a very blue-collar family. I had really good parents. They were both alcoholics, but it took a while for that to manifest itself. It took a while for the destruction of the family to come about. We didn't have very much. We were always stretched to the limits. I grew up in a World War II housing project on the outskirts of Wichita, southeast edge of Wichita, called Plainview. It was where the rather economically depressed folks lived, and it was a very diverse community. It was a World War II housing project, as I said. It's comprised of mostly blacks, whites, Hispanics, and Native Americans. We all got along great. Everybody got along great. It was in the 50s, and I remember that it was a poor area, but I had a good time there. I liked it, and I was part of the Native American community. And an ethnic mix of several different things. Two of them are, I think, are relatively benign from an alcoholic standpoint. But when I drink, it's the Irish and Comanche parts that seem to kick up. Usually something is going to happen before the evening is over. And I thought it was a pretty good combination. Because I love the Irish music. Love that Irish music. Those rebel songs and drinking songs and freedom songs and all of that. And I knew them all. I had all the albums. And I'd find places around the country when I was flying that had live entertainment. And I'd head for those, whether it was in Chicago or Boston or Washington or some other place. I knew where those live Irish places were. I'd be the last guy coming out of the door there after being in there just having this rousing time. Then there were other times I'll be someplace else, maybe the other side would kick in. I think I'll just have a couple of drinks and go kill some white people. I can tell you, living in Billings, Montana, in the midst of all those cowboy bars, it's not a good time for that to kick in. Matter of fact, I was looking at this podium motif here. People who are listening to the CD don't know what this looks like, but I was sitting there, I go, is this a castle motif, or with all of these kind of frontier post-like things? I thought, that could be a frontier fort. I should probably be more comfortable on the other side right here. Not supposed to be on this side. But when I was 14, the alcohol had really destroyed the family by that time. A lot of bad things were happening inside the family. My parents got the first divorce, and it really hit me hard. I mean, I was really affected by that. That younger sister is about 2 years younger than I am. We were both really affected. And it was the first of several divorces to come. And by the time I got through high school, about 3 more years, each parent had been married, divorced 2 more times, or somewhere right close to that time frame. And I didn't like step-parents, I didn't like step-siblings. And I seem to recall that I had basically 2 emotions growing up. I was either laughing a lot or I was angry. And I got into a lot of conflicts and clashes with these step-parents and step-siblings. And I wouldn't know one of them if they were in the room tonight. Don't remember anything. But I do remember having problems with them and then going to the other family and living over there for a while until something happened over there, and then I would nomad it back to the other side, and eventually faces and names had changed. And I was actually a pretty good student when I applied myself, but nobody was paying any attention, so I squandered a tremendous amount of academic opportunity in school. I didn't take a lot of things that I could have. I remember my senior year, nobody was watching, and I took advantage of it. I remember my senior year, I had a typing class and 2 study halls. Good for me. Anyway, I graduated from high school, so athlete, I was probably average at best, although I thought I was pretty good. Graduated when I was 17, and had decided to join the service. Now, I wasn't drinking a whole lot at this point in time. Over the course of this story, I'm going to have to try to crowd a lot of stuff in here. I've got a timer up here because I know Lee and John here pretty well. I've been with them a number of times, and I know they get upset when I go on to the 3rd CD. And, I got to do a lot of crowding in here, and I'm not going to do a big long drunk log. I'm not one of those guys. First of all, my story will differ in a little bit in the sense that I'm not going to hear me say I never fit in, I never belong. I know that that's the story of the people. Many of them have come up here and said their story, and I accept that. I know that's true. You're also not going to hear me say I took the first drink and I knew the magic had happened. It didn't happen. It took me long, just like it took my parents to actually, for the rate of progression to actually catch up with me. But I wasn't getting in a lot of trouble when I was a teenager. I wasn't drinking that much. I was too young to drink, looked too young. And I had decided to join the service. This was 1956. And I didn't know what I was going to join. And about that time, one of my friends came back from the Marine Corps. And I was really impressed. He and I spent an afternoon in a bar. He was right back home from boot camp. And I was listening. We just sat there and drank beer and beer and beer and beer. And listened to these horrible, sadistic stories of what drill instructors, Marine DIs do to their recruits for 13 weeks in Marine boot camp. I was just hanging on every word. And I probably had an opportunity to alter the course of my life if I'd sought some professional help, but I thought, man, I just can't wait to go try that. And by this time I was 18, and so within a day or 2 I found a Marine recruiter, and I signed on the line, and off I go to Marine boot camp. Now, I found a home there. I really fit in and belonged. Once I got past the initial culture shock, man, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. It was very tough, it was structured, very disciplined, camaraderie was over the top, very competitive, and I loved it. I just ate it up. I liked it. I really liked it. And I just didn't want to fail. That's all I had. My goal was just not to fail. And at the end of the 13 weeks, the drill instructors called us all together, about 70 of us there. He called out 3 names, the names of the 3 top guys in the platoon. And to my complete total surprise, mine was the number 2 name called. I couldn't believe it. This is the first time I had ever really accomplished something in the midst of a lot of severe adversity and competition. I was just immensely proud. I had 1 stripe on my sleeve. I was a PFC. And that was heavy rank. And we went to Camp Hill, and I just kept looking down that sleeve. PFC Krause. PFC. And all my buddies are slick sleeves. And we go to Camp Hill, and I remember one night it was raining, and because of my heavy rank, I was acting corporal of the guard. I'm inside where it's dry, they're outside where it's wet. And I remember looking over at the corner of this Quonset hut, and there was a first lieutenant's uniform hanging up there, and I thought, by God, you know, I may have a career. At the rate I'm moving up, General can't be too far away. And I was going to stay. I really liked it. 4.5 years later, I was called in by the commanding officer, and he said, there's a new program out called Marine Aviation Cadet. And he said, you're the only guy in the unit that's got the qualifying scores that would get you in there. And if you want to make the attempt to go fly, you can go make sure you get a chance to go test for it. I'd always wanted to fly. I always wanted to fly. But I also knew that people that got to fly didn't come from my background. That people who got to fly were well educated, they had money, prestige, status. Those are the folks who got the flying slots and became pilots, not people like me. But he's laying an opportunity here in front of me. So I went and I took the tests all day long, and I passed them. He told me then, he said, about half of the people are not going to make it. They're going to wash out. And you're one of a handful that's coming in from the back door, the enlisted side, with no college. None. And everybody coming in from the other side has to have at least 2 years, and they'll probably have a lot more than that. Those will be the guys you're running with. And I could do the logic on that. If half are not going to make it, I'm in the high probability end of not making it because of my educational deficit. And I was just racked with this fear of failing. And so it really motivated me to work hard. And I owe that to my parents. My parents died from this disease, but I always tell Safe from the podium that they weren't drunk all the time. And during their sober times, they taught me some really good things, and I'm indebted to my parents. They gave me some good stuff. And I know how to work hard. And through every one of those 4 phases, I always ended up as the number 2 guy in the class. I could never figure out why or how. I never gathered any confidence or complacency about that. The first time it happened, I was sure it was administrative error. And I never did get cocky or complacent. I just plodded along. Final 6 months, we left Florida. I'm drinking hard now because I'm going to be a fighter pilot, and that's what fighter pilots do. And I'm a Marine on top of that. All my buddies were drinking. I'm in a culture that I'm really drinking hard. But I'm managing my drinking. I'm stopping Saturday night because I've got a goal in mind, and I need Sunday to recover, I need Sunday to study, and I need to be in shape and ready to go Monday morning. I'm still managing my drinking at this point. And I went to Beeville, Texas. And I got there on a Friday night, which was August 13th, 1962. Got drunk with a whole bunch of my buddies at the Officers Club. They said, let's go into town. There's some good-looking South Texas girls, and they like us cadets. And because we represent a lot of really strong marrying potential. And so I said, okay. I was never very gutsy or aggressive with the gals, but I had a lot to drink, so I went in with them. And they immediately went after Carla, the girls, and I hung back and continued to drink a little bit more as I meticulously rehearsed a few good things to say. And now we are. The more I drink, the smarter and cooler, hipper, and slicker I get. And taller and better and everything. So I had just about reached the zenith of that. I'm ready to go. So I walked up to the driver's side, and the driver was not talking to anybody. Then she turned and looked at me, and she was a really good-looking girl. And everything just evaporated. I forgot everything I was going to say. I'm standing there flat-footed and awkward, and I'm not sure what to say. And she's expecting something. And the only thing that came out of my mouth was, "You got the most beautiful brown eyes I've ever seen." Except it came out kind of sideways, like, "This guy's She gives me this look. And, I thought, I could have peed on the side of her car and she wouldn't have looked at me any different. And I just turned around and walked away. I just left. I didn't try to salvage it at all. I just left. So I'm back there drinking some more, and she gets out of the car, and I'm where I could see her. And I hadn't went this way, but I was watching. She walks inside, and I get to watch her go up 3 different ways, and I'm going, my God almighty, she got turquoise shorts on, a really cute butt, nice legs, brown eyes, way more than I had on my list. And I got an Indian buddy of mine that talks about that. He says, before we get really into our disease, we got this long list of all the things that our mate is going to have. These are requisites, prerequisites. He said, by the time we finally get married after a long years of drinking, we'll settle for somebody that's got a full set of teeth and a job. He's the same guy that said he'd had 7 DUIs. He was only 7 before he found out that DWI didn't mean drinking with Indians. There you go. Anyway, I was watching her walk in, and I was really getting an eyeful. And I had a naive thought at the time that didn't strike me as an naive thought. I didn't know it's an naive thought until I heard it about 29 years later, and somebody says, well, I looked at her and I thought, I want what she has, and I'm willing to go to any length to get it. And I did. Ran into her the next day accidentally. Went in and faked that I was that it was an accident. Was sober, scared, and nervous. And she began to talk with me, bought her a cup of coffee, and she and I began to date. And she was the girl that was sitting next to me. So we started downhill on the treatment center. Same girl with those same brown eyes. So she turned my wings and gold bars on me. I drank all day. We danced all day. It was a great day. She went home to Kansas with me on leave, met my family. I told her about my family. I told her what to expect. I had made promises to her. We got engaged. We were going to get married. And I promised her that our family would never be like the one that I grew up in, or like the one that she saw back in Kansas. I went to Vietnam, and I was we were one of the first jet squadrons over there. I was drinking a lot now. I was really drinking a lot. But I wasn't getting any consequences. The things that were happening to me were not serious. They weren't, they had no real significance. They were what I call colorful. And that was I was proud of a lot of these things. Because guys that talk about it, Jesus Christ, what else, you know what you did last night? You know, oh. And so I was really proud of this reputation I was developing. Feeling kind of sorry for some of the ones that didn't quite have the imagination I had. And we went to Vietnam. I did well over there. Came back with some personal declarations. I was with 20 of the finest pilots the Marine Corps ever put together, I think. And up until recently, as a matter of fact, they're still planning right now. We still get together every 2 years on Vietnam Dutch, the ones that are left. And I had a terrific career there. I came back, had a lot of accomplishments, things that I was really proud of. Spent 2.5 more years as a flight instructor at Advanced Jet Training Command, and I finally sat down and resigned my commission. I got a regular commission in Vietnam, and they were hard to get, pretty competitive. I thought there's no way the Marine Corps will ever give a guy with a high school education a regular commission. And I had done well, and I got one. So I was set for my career. I came back, and 2.5 years later, I sat down and resigned it, and I went with Northwest Airlines. Something I hadn't planned on doing. And Barbara and I had talked about adopting a little child even when we were dating. And I said, let's either do it or let's not do it. One of the things that I left out was that immediately after she and I got married, boom, she was pregnant, boom, we had our first kid. And then boom, a year from the date that we had the first one, we had the second one. I mean, we were popping them out real fast. And I used to get tired of people coming up and saying, you guys Catholic? After that happened for a while, I used to think, well, why does everybody think only Catholics can do this? But I just say, no, we're just a couple of horny Protestants. We had these 2 little boys, and we decided to adopt a little girl, and we did. It was right on that time where if you had kids of your own, it was hard to adopt. We adopted this little Chippewa girl, a little Chippewa girl. It took us 14 months. She was a beautiful little girl. I thought, now Barbara's got her daughter. We've got the perfect family, the perfect marriage, the perfect career. And I, of course, didn't know what little girls do with their dads. And she just immediately became the center of my universe. She was my sunshine. She couldn't walk past me without me saying, Dawn, come over here and give me a hug. Thanks for being my girl. Looking at that beautiful little face, and she'd say, thanks for being my dad. Drinking was progressing. Things were happening, but not bad things, not yet. They're certainly there in hindsight. I mean, I see all of that now. I couldn't see it then. When she was 17, I had passed up being a captain for 2 years, and I decided to be a captain. She's going to graduate from high school and go to college, I thought. So I went to Chicago and took a special written test, and she chose that afternoon. Barbara took me to the airport to run away from home. I didn't see it coming. Barbara didn't see it coming. I don't know if I'd been drinking or not. If I'd have seen it coming, I don't like everything at the door of alcoholism. I don't deny it. I just don't know. And it devastated me. I heard about it the next day when I called home, and I panicked and blurted out where Barbara should go to call, look, and find her. I got on the airplane, and something happened to me on the way home. Because by the time I landed, I hated her. I hated hated her worse than I hated anyone or anything ever in my life on the face of this planet. I hated her. And so I told Barbara, I don't care about her, I don't care if she dies out there, she'll never come home again. I never want her name mentioned to me again, ever. I don't want to hear her name as long as I'm breathing. And I told the rest of the family that. And in a way that can only appear insanely amusing, I looked around at this whole scenario with the family and with her, the situation that just occurred, and I thought, you know what? Barbara's struggling a little bit with this. She probably needs a therapist. That's where this therapist came from. I plucked his name out of the phone book. We went to see him. We talked to him for about twice a month for 2 years, a little over 2 years. One of the things he said to us, one of the interesting things was that never once during any of this really intensive discussion did the issue of my drinking come up. And I wasn't hiding it. I was convinced I wasn't an alcoholic. Periodically, I'd wonder about it a little bit, so I'd set up and devise tests to see. And I know it'll surprise everybody, but I passed them all with flying colors. And so I had no fear of talking about drinking. I just did. It wasn't a problem with me, but it just never came up. I'm fascinated by that. Just amazed that that never occurred. I didn't like talking to him about my daughter. One time he said something to me about her, and I looked at him, and I never formed this thought in my mind, but it just flew out of my mouth, and I've never forgotten it because it said so much about me. I looked at him and I said, I'm going to tell you something, doctor. I said, I would rather hate than hurt. And that was exactly the way I did it. I didn't feel pain because I hated it. I hated it. I got angry. I didn't feel the pain. It couldn't come through. He said, you've survived a childhood doing that, and he said, if you continue, it'll destroy you. And I looked at him and thought, you may be a PhD family therapist, but by God, I'm an airline pilot, I'll do it my way. He was right. He was right. He said, every time you had one of these shifts in your family, he said, what you felt and what you experienced was abandonment and betrayal. I had never labeled any of that. That's exactly what I thought and felt. The minute he said, I thought, that's exactly what I felt and thought. And he said, now comes this daughter that you love more than anything. And she does it. And he said, I can tell you it's going to take an awful lot of hatred to be able to cover that. And I thought, that's okay, I'll do the work. So I've been hard and heavy for them for 2 years. Now, I'm not an alcoholic because Don made me drink. That was the place I went. I went to the bottle. I wanted the bottle. And I never got what I wanted out of the bottle. I wanted relief. I would lock myself in a hotel room and just drank on layovers. Barbara didn't want me drinking at home. I said, that's okay. I'd lock myself in a hotel room, and I'd go through a quart of booze and nothing flat, and I wanted relief. I wanted to float away and get away. And all that happened, Father Martin talks about it, is I fueled that hatred. I just sat there and I stoked it and I fueled it, and it was just white hot. And every time I finished one of my drinking sessions, I hated her more. I hated her more. And that's kind of where we were when all of this thing had happened, when this arrest took place. And I went into treatment, and I couldn't have gone to a better place, and thank God it was there for me. And I was devastated. I didn't want anybody in there to know who I was or what I was. It was a week before anybody knew the color of my eyes. I would not look up. I sat everywhere with my head down. I don't even know how I got dressed in the mornings. I was that devastated. And within a day or two or three, the media had it. Now everybody in there knew who I was. And it was the lead story every time it came on the news. And I became suicidal, something I didn't think I had the capacity for. Most of my friends thought I was a pretty tough, hard Marine. I thought I was. But I learned in there that you can hurt so much, it goes so far past any human threshold I thought was bearable, that I almost killed myself in there. I just wanted it to stop. I wanted it to end. And somehow I had a God-given moment of clarity. I thought, my family will never survive. If I kill myself in a treatment center, that's worse than what's happened. And thanks to the patients and the counselors and the doctors, I began to think more about living than dying in a very slow, subtle way. I was not even aware of it. In the first week of treatment, we went into a group, and they closed the door. There were 8 or 10 of us in there, and I don't cry. I didn't cry at my parents' funerals. It's not okay to cry, not for me. And I began to talk about my daughter, totally counterintuitively. I talked about my daughter, and I broke down and cried. In front of 8 or 10 people, I sobbed. My heart broke. Probably for the first time in my life ever, I took the pain straight on the way we're supposed to. I accepted it. And And I think it was one of my greatest moments in treatment, because I began to heal that day. And I finally got a hold of Barbara and said, get a hold of Don. Let's put the family back together again. They had no visitors, no phone calls in this place. They said, that's such an amazing breakthrough for you. If that can happen, we will give you a day room and let you do that. The two doctors heard about it and said, can we please come watch? The family therapist had written this off as an impossible family situation because I was too unyielding. I was just too rigid. I would never yield. And I walked into the day room, the treatment center, shortly thereafter, and I saw my daughter for the first time in 2 years. She was smaller than I remembered, and the two doctors were off to the side. And I walked over, and I can't tell you what it felt like to put my arms around my daughter and hug her and tell her how much I loved her instead of how much I hated her. And I looked down in her arms, and there was a 5-month-old granddaughter. My daughter had gotten married. I didn't know her last name. And I picked up my granddaughter, and she took my heart as quickly as my daughter had. I'm hardly into treatment, and I'm already seeing some of these promises begin to come true. This horrible gap in my family, this slashing rip had just been fixed and repaired. There were a lot of things that happened that I don't have time to go into, but I suddenly began getting word of the week to the day that I went into treatment. I wouldn't watch TV. The hospital had 2 of them. I wouldn't go near anyone. And the patients, there's always 1 or 2 that feel like it's their designated duty to come report. So I'm hearing it all. And a week to the day that I got into treatment, Northwest Airlines fired me, as they should have. The FAA issued an emergency revocation of all my flying certificates, as they should have. And I lost my medical certificate because of the diagnosis of alcoholism, and that was fair also. I'm a hardcore believer in acceptance of personal responsibility and consequences. And everything that happened to me was fair and appropriate. Everything was fair. The thing that hurt was that my family didn't deserve it, and I had brought this on them as well. So I'm now stripped of everything. Within 30 days, we were broke. I had grown up poor. I had managed to achieve a comfortable level of living, and now everything that I had managed to save and put back and acquire was gone. It was gone. So now I'm back where I started. Here comes 6 legal consequences, one at a time. Nobody knew anything about legal consequences when this began. Not even the attorneys that talked to us on that day of our deposition. But there was a federal law in place that nobody knew about. Initially, Minnesota indicted me, then North Dakota indicted me, then they doubled the counts, and they were having to come take me out every 2 to 3 days to tell me these things. I had never been in jail. The only time I was going to be in jail was a POW in Vietnam. That was the only way that I would ever end up in a jail. And now I'm looking at jail time, and it was inconceivable, and it would just strike fear and terror in my heart. And it'd take me a couple of days for my breathing just to return to normal, and then they would motion me out of another class or group, and here we go again. The last time they took me out, there was a doctor, and I thought, oh God, there's never been a doctor before. We went down to his office. He sat me down and said, I have to tell you, a federal grand jury has just indicted you. You're looking at 15 years in federal prison, $250,000 fine, and an attorney's coming in Sunday and wants $50,000, which I didn't even close remotely have. And I went, no, and he said, I have to ask you if you're going to hurt yourself. I said, no. I went back to my room, and I collapsed. I don't remember the actual fall. The only thing I remember is lying on the carpet, I was crying one more time. And I said, God, I can't do this anymore. So 6 times, I got nothing left. Can't do it one more time. I'll do it one more time. Please help me. And I remember sleeping that night. I got out of treatment. I came back to Minnesota. I was immediately involved in a heavy-duty, heavy publicized trial. Everywhere I went, there was no place I could find or hide where there weren't reporters sticking microphones and cameras in my face. There was no way around it. But I had an advantage over the other 2 because I was the alcoholic. I had worked desperately hard at treatment. I had probably worked as hard in treatment to get sober as I had to get my wings in commission. And I had given up all my other thinking. The good thing was I was so beaten and so down and so devastated that I hoped there was something to the program process that they were telling me about. I had nothing else to bet on. So I didn't argue, I didn't analyze, I didn't try to debate, I didn't do anything. I just latched onto this and hoped there was something to it. And so I took that with me to the trial. And at night I could go to an AA meeting. I was just barely sober. But I could go to an AA meeting, the other two guys couldn't. The other two pilots that were charged with me on this thing. And I never shared it there. And at first I was scared because people recognized me. And then it would take me a few minutes to settle and know that I'm in a safe place. I never shared, I just sat and listened to you. And the next day I would get through that courtroom experience, which was just indescribable. Media is covering it, they're painting my picture. It's on the 6 o'clock news. They're telling the world what a very worthless piece of crap I am, have been, and always will be. And it's hard. It's really hard to sit there and watch that and listen to that. Nothing about the good things in life that I've done. Nothing. And sometimes I would look across the courtroom. You know, I was with Barbara. She would mouth the words, "I love you." Knowing I'd be okay for a while. It was a 3-week trial. It was quickly over. I had an amazing experience with an attorney that in the interest of time I can't talk to you about. I'd love to tell you his story. It's a wonderful story. I told him, I said, "I'm going to be found guilty, Peter, and I know that. I know you're going to do your best, but it's going to be okay." We went back in. Jury went out and came back in very quickly, so I knew what that was about. And I was the first one because I was the captain. And I saw him stiffen when they announced the verdict of guilty. I just reached over and I patted him and said, "It's okay. It's all right." We went back for the sentencing. Sentencing guidelines were in place at that time. A lot of things had been done that were pretty dirty inside the system. I got to see it. And guidelines were 12 months minimum, 18 months maximum. I knew I was going to get 18 months because I was a captain. I'd accepted that. And a day and a half before the sentencing, I walked into my attorney's office. He said, I knew something was wrong. I felt it. He said, "I just got a phone call an hour ago. The judge is going to up the ante. He's going to depart upward from the sentencing guidelines, which he had the power to do." And I watched the judge. I knew the judge had strong feelings about this case. He didn't hide him. I saw him. He may have tried to hide him, but I saw him. I was aware of it. And I didn't begrudge that to him. It was a horrific betrayal of the public trust. He was entitled to all of that. The prosecutor hadn't asked him for extra time, but the judge, now it's his idea. And I thought, this is going to be big. This is going to be big time. And I walked out there and I told Barbara, it's the same thing all over again. Step one, I'm powerless over what's going to happen. I've got to accept whatever it is, no matter what. And there had been a judge in federal judge in treatment with me. He cornered me every time he could, and he told me a lot of things I just assumed he kept quiet about it. He said the sentencing, he said, is a facade. He said, that's a facade. He said, when we walk through the door, the sentence is set. He said, you're going to talk, your attorney's going to talk, maybe you'll have witnesses, but he said, none of that bears anything on the sentencing. He said, we've settled on the sentence, we've read the letters, nobody's going to change from the bench. And judges and attorneys across the country have told me that. So I knew that nothing I said was going to make any difference. I was the first to stand and speak. The judge had lectured for 30 minutes about what was getting ready to happen. And he had released it to the media. The media had printed that this was going to be a big sentence. And as I stood to speak, I was still so scared. I had not been able to compose anything to talk about. I said, God, just let me say something from the heart. Let me get it out. I got a hostile judge, a hostile jury, a hostile media. It's not a friendly place, so I got to say something. I talked about being grateful to be sober. I was grateful for the things that had happened inside my family. And I had accepted responsibility for this from day one. Now, I couldn't change what had happened yesterday, much less what had happened a few months before. And to everybody's dismay, he sentenced me to 16 months in federal prison. It blew everybody away. Now, I wasn't real anxious to go dancing off for 16 months, but that was a lot better than what I was looking for. I was looking for 5 years minimum. Later, he told my attorney, a couple of years later, he told my attorney, he said, I was going to sentence Lyle to 4 years in federal prison until he said what he said. Until I looked at him from the bench. And and considered his past and considered him as a human being. That judge changed his sentence from the bench that day, one of the miracles. The other thing he did that surprised everyone, I'd given my personal face to my wife. I said, I think based on everything that's happened, he'll have his handcuffs and led directly into custody for the cameras. So I'd given her all my personal stuff. And he made a comment. He said, this is a very complex case, a first of its kind ever case. And he said it was not designed for pilots. It was designed for other professions in the transportation industries, and I know there's a lot of complex issues. He said, I'll let you three gentlemen remain free until your appeals have been exhausted. The other two said, okay, and I said, no, I'll go to jail now. It's time to go. Because everything I did, I've learned in here. I didn't want to go to jail. I didn't want to go to prison. That life on life's terms dictated that I do that. And I told my kids, the reality is I can't come out the back door until I go in the front. And I remember something I learned in the Marine Corps because I was terrified of going into prison. And courage is not the absence of fear, it's the ability to continue in the face of it. And my job now was to suck it up and go do it. The judge said, to my attorney later, he said, no defendant has ever done that before. 16 years on the bench, he said, I've never had a defendant do that. And he said, at first I was lost for words. I told my lawyer, I said, well, he wasn't lost very long. So on December the 5th, 1990, 34 years from the day that I'd entered Marine boot camp, I walked into the Atlanta Federal Prison System. I served 14 months. I had 54 to 62 days good conduct time. I don't talk about prison from the podium. Don't think it has anything to do with my recovery, but I tell you that my recovery has everything to do with how I handle prison. Absolutely everything. I'll make two quick comments on the podium. I'll say that there are two groups of really sick people in prison. The sickest group goes home every night. And there'll be somebody out here who comes in and goes, well, you know, I'm a correctional officer. I always issue the caveat from the podium that if you remember this fellowship, that does not apply to you. And if that doesn't help you, then please don't talk to me. Call your sponsor. The other thing I say that was really grating and irritating was I made 12 cents an hour in there and there was no 401k plan. I came out of there, I had a lot of experiences in there. But I came out of there as broken, stripped of everything. The judge, on top of everything else, put a final layer of concrete over the top of my coffin. He put sanctions on me to make sure I never flew again, even in spite of what the FAA had done. All I've done is try to stay sober. That's all. One day at a time. Target the next right thing. After I came out of prison, sometime the judge lifted those sanctions. Nobody thought that was even remotely possible. He lifted the sanctions, which took one of the S's out of the word impossible. The FAA then said, if you want to fly again, you start at the bottom of the private license. Now, one of my pilot buddies thought it was possible to start literally from the ground up and go back to where I had once been. And I didn't either at first. And then I said, okay. I stay sober one day at a time. Everything I do in here is one thing at a time, one step at a time, everything at a time. If I do the licenses the same way and change my attitude, I can do these. And 10 and a half months later, I had 4 licenses back. Wow. There's no quick fixes, no cut acrosses, no shortcuts. Just hard work. But there's a flying aspect of that. And I looked at that, and that's $10,000 to $20,000. I was broke. There was no way that was ever going to happen. I couldn't do it. Barbara said, we still got our furniture left. If you want, I think it's important that you get your licenses back. Why don't we sell our furniture? You know any wives that do things like that? They're few and far between. That was all we had left. She's going to sell the furniture. And I said, no. I got a phone call and a letter the same day from the Northwest Pilot at a flight school. Said, I want you to come up here and live with me and my family, go through the flight school free. I was under 13 conditions of probation, so I had to check in with the Minnesota Department of Corrections. I went up there in the summer of '93. I spent 44 days up there, rained out 14 days, and I just never quit studying because I know how to work. And in the 30 days, I flew 78 hours and I got all 4 licenses back. Excuse me. got 2 of them by 11:15 one morning. I don't think that had ever been done before. And I came back and I thought, that's great. Who's going to hire me? Nobody. Everybody knows my name. The only place I might fly is in Africa if they never had any TV and coffee coverage. A couple of months later, the license has actually come in the mail. I'll say it from the head of the pilot union. A grievance had been filed on my behalf because of the termination. I never activated it because they were fair and terminated me. Excuse me. I never activated that. I said they were fair. They didn't fire me for being an alcoholic. They fired me for what I did, so I never fought. This guy says to me, he said, 3 hours ago, he said, I had the best phone call I've ever had because he said, John Dasberg, who's the president and CEO of Northwest Airlines, personally reinstated you to full flight status at Northwest Airlines. Wow. I couldn't stop the tears again. I had disgraced this airline so bad. Jay Leno, I made a career out of his monologue. Jay Leno called me in June of '96 and apologized. That's another story. And I couldn't believe it. I was going to go back. I went back in a very emotional signing ceremony, last chance agreement. Never be a captain again. I said, that's fine, I don't care. Giving back my flying career, some retirement. I couldn't believe it. I was overwhelmingly welcome back. There's always going to be a small segment that doesn't think we should ever get up again and would like to keep their foot on our necks. They're relatively small, I think. I was overwhelmingly welcome back. And I did the best I could. Northwest now had an alcohol program because they got the hell beat out of them when I did. And I'm part of the program, helping young pilots come back into the flying career and get sober. And as I retired, well, I was coming up on my final year. The miracles in this thing just keep going on. And I get a phone call. John Dasberg said, coming up on your final year, I think it's time for you to be a captain again. And he put me in the last seat of 747 for my final year. Trusting me. I did everything I could to be the best employee on that property. I did everything I could to vindicate this incredible risk that he took on me. 50,000 employees, why would he bring one back? I told him one time, I said, you know 70% of us relapse? If I had relapsed after a flying incident, your career as a CEO would have been blackballed and blackmarked and over forever because of your judgment. Why would you take such a chance? He just smiled. I never got an answer. So I did everything I could to vindicate those people who had taken such a huge risk on me. And I retired honorably, mandatory retirement age of 60, September 29th, 1998. And within a day or two of my retirement, my lawyer called me and he said, I just got a call from Judge Rosenbaum, my trial judge. Judge Rosenbaum was the toughest judge in the Minnesota Federal District, now chief judge. And Judge Rosenbaum told my attorney, he said, in 16 years, I have never supported a petition for pardon. I tell Lyle, if he wants to make the attempt, I'll support his. The judge wrote a 3-page affidavit on me that is so chokingly emotional and powerful that I have never been able to read it 25, 30 times. I can't read it from page 1 to page 3 without tearing up. And it's a long process like everything was. And I spent 2 years in the process. And Barbara and I walked in one day and there were 8 phone messages telling me I had just received a presidential pardon. That's a huge thing for a federal felony conviction. That just changes life. The second day in treatment, we went to an outside meeting, and I sat with my head down. You know, I listened to the readings. And then they read the promises, and I kind of perked up at that. I thought, wow, I wonder why they're doing that. If this is part of the process, maybe there's something to this. And then they hit that part that says, no matter how far down the scale we've gone, we'll see our experience can benefit others. And I thought, no, not for me. That may apply to you, but it will not apply to me, because I'm going too far down. And I just kind of muted out the rest of it. And I've had this incredible, miraculous journey, most of which you've not heard about today. So if you're new here, and you think it's hopeless, let me tell you something. You just keep coming back. You just keep doing the next right thing. You just keep believing, because it says sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, it will always materialize. I have been so blessed. I would have cut an arm off to avoid coming to AA. This was not on the high list of things that I wanted to achieve in my life. And I would have missed so much. I would not have been here with you today. I wouldn't have gotten to meet the thousands of wonderful people I get to meet. I want to close with something. I heard Father Martin say it, and I'm no Father Martin, don't try to be, but I like the way it addresses life. It says, I do not wish you joy without a sorrow, nor endless day without the healing dark, nor brilliant sun without the restful shadow, nor tides that never turn against your mark. I wish you strength, faith, love, and wisdom, and goods, gold enough to help some needy one. I wish you songs, but also blessed silence, and God's sweet peace when every day is done. Thank you so much for having me.